My name's Ben.
And my name's Josh.
Welcome back to FPL Graduates and welcome back to another Game Week Guide video. Game Week 18 is just around the corner. Game Week 19 is also just around the corner. Game Week 20 also is just around the corner. There's lots of game weeks coming up thick and fast through this festive period. So we're very much looking forward to that. We're going to be going through some injury updates as well. We've had a lot of injuries over the last couple of days to go through and digest, as well as some interesting targets that we're looking to pick up over these next few game weeks.
Indeed, lots of corners. It's like we're playing Monopoly this Christmas time. So, a Merry Christmas if you are watching this, and if you do celebrate, should I say? We're recording this on Christmas Eve, so dedication to the cause from me and Ben, getting this content out to you guys. Isak update is up first. Obviously, it's been confirmed for a few days now that he has potentially broken his leg, so he's going to be out for several months. Obviously, a big blow for Liverpool. He hasn't really got going. Obviously, scored and then broke his leg straight away. So, yeah, not ideal for Liverpool at all. It does make things a little bit easier in the short term, at least for minutes security of Ekatike and other assets in that attack. Obviously, Mo Salah's off at AFCON as well. Cody Gakpo is on the verge of returning. I think Slot used 50-50 for Bradley and the same sort of thing for Cody Gakpo this week. So he could be on the return. Still think Ekatike's minutes should be good. What's your thoughts on the initial impact of that Isak injury, Ben?
Yeah, definitely increases the appeal of XTK. We know that the minutes are fairly secure now and potentially fairly secure up top for him for those few months that he's going to be out. So for a long-term pick now, Ekatike becomes very, very good. Before this injury, Ekatike, in my opinion, is still a really good short-term pick over this AFCON period, but now it widens the appeal for him. It's a shame we're not really going to see any FPL action from Isak probably till the end of the season. It just means that next season we might get a underpriced Isak, which could be interesting looking that far ahead. But yeah, unfortunate for him, but in an FPL sense, it provides a lot more clarity for us managers.
Yeah, definitely. Next up, then, we've got two updates from sort of the same game. Arsenal faced Crystal Palace last night at the time of recording this. Hincapié or Hincape, however you want to pronounce his name, he wasn't in the squad last night. So, yeah, it seems like he's picked up an injury basically against Everton. It doesn't sound very promising because Arteta's talking about Martinelli having a knock and then doesn't describe Hincape's injury as the same, which would sort of makes me feel like anyway, it's a little bit longer term. Just reading into it, obviously it is Arteta; he could be fine and fit to go this game week. We don't really know. What's your initial thoughts on that one, Ben?
Initial thoughts are as it's a little more serious than Arteta's letting on. That's just the vibe you're sort of getting from him. You're never going to get a clear answer from him. I think what he wants to do is provide a little bit of doubt on his availability whilst he's trying to get Gabriel back up to full fitness as quickly as he can and almost sort of try and transition that. So when Gabriel's back, he'll probably then say Hincapié is out for X amount of time. So I think he's just being a little careful with his words and it doesn't sound too promising. Lots of rumours going around that it could be a shoulder injury or something like that. So yeah, it's going to be a wait and see. But for now, I'd honestly look at sort of looking to sell him in the short term. Minutes aren't secure past next game week anyway, with Gabriel returning. So for myself, if you do own him, then look, I think it's a sell at this point.
Yeah, definitely agree on that one. Another defensive injury was Chris Richards. He came off on a stretcher actually at the Emirates, which didn't look great. The update from Glasner post match though was a little bit more promising. It seems like he says here he needed stitches in his foot after being stamped on. The doctor told me it doesn't look so bad, so let's see if he can face Tottenham on Saturday. So from what looked like a really bad injury in the initial phase, I mean it still could be to be honest, but it looks a little bit more promising than what we first thought. So yeah, potential availability for this weekend. I think if you have him, I'd probably start him with that news. If you wanted to, if you've got other options, maybe like for myself, I've got Anderson, so I'm probably going to start Anderson ahead of Richards just to save me the headache. But if you're lacking options, maybe then by all means go ahead and start him. I wouldn't be too mad about that. Obviously, just know that there is definitely a possibility that he might not play this weekend, given the fact that he has had stitches in his foot. So it will just depend on how quick he can recover from that. What's your thoughts on that one, Ben?
I think it's more likely that he messes this game week.
Yeah,
Just looking at sort of the sort of way Glasner was speaking, it was post match, so obviously he's not going to have all the information to hand there in terms of how serious the injury was. So yeah, I think unlikely, but again, I think he either starts and is fine or he's out the squad
yeah.
completely. So I'm not against sort of starting him if you need to. Obviously the fixture isn't, wasn't the most ideal fixture in any case. So you might be in a position where you actually can afford to just leave him on the bench for a week.
Yeah, definitely. Would be probably against selling him. Although Crystal Palace defensively haven't been great, he still picks up DEFCON. I'm sure they'll improve in the weeks to come. The final update, then injury roundup. It's been quite a few considering it's been such a short turnaround. Is obviously Bruno Fernandes. He came off at half time against Aston Villa at the weekend with a hamstring injury. The update is actually quite positive. Not necessarily one for FPL managers though. He should be out for about a month, which in FPL terms is ages. So yeah, definitely a sell now. One thing to note as well is that Kobbie Mainoo is also going to be missing that Newcastle game. So very different midfield compared to usual for Manchester United. I imagine Casemiro will come back in. Obviously, he's back from suspension, but who partners him? Honestly, take your picks. I'm really, even as a United fan, I don't know who's going to play midfield this week. So, yeah, what's your thoughts on that, Ben? Obviously, it's slightly frustrating because Bruno Fernandes, well, I think I've seen he's missed maybe 20 days in his career through injury. So this is probably his longest stint out in what is probably the most important time for FPL managers.
Yeah, it's important for FPL managers. Look, what it does is it frees up a lot of funds to make some quite aggressive moves, which I think is going to be the case. A lot of people going towards those Liverpool assets for the next two in particular. So fantastic back to back at home. So yeah, I don't think it's the end of the world. I think for the managers that made early moves, this is probably going to sort of hurt them a little bit. But yeah, for any case, I don't think it's the worst news for FPL managers to have to sort of move him on for now, because there's going to be a month long sort of absence, quite a few game weeks, and you can do quite a lot with the money once you sort of move Bruno on.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to take a look at some Bruno replacements now. There's quite a few of them, so we'll try and rattle through them as quick as we can. Obviously, Ben mentioned the Liverpool assets. Florian Wirtz has been spoken about quite a bit. He has returned in, I think, 3 out of his last 4 game weeks. Obviously, got max bonus and an assist last game week against Spurs. The main reason people are steaming into these Liverpool assets are the fixtures. Wolves at home this week is obviously ideal. Leeds at home is much better than facing Leeds away. Despite Leeds being on a good run of form, I'd still say that's a green fixture, to be honest. And then Fulham away as well. Haven't been amazing this season, although their home defensive record is better than it is away. So, not necessarily the easiest game. Vert's obviously yet to score in the Premier League so far. Come close quite a few times. 2.2 XG as well would suggest that he's probably, going to sort of due a goal, I guess you could say. What's your thoughts on Wirtz, Ben?
Yeah, like him as an asset for this week. The XG and XA stats have massively improved over the last few weeks, and that's coincided with some of the returns that we have been seeing. I don't think that the improvement is still not sort of the level that we probably expect from an £8 million asset, but in the short term for those 3 fixtures, I honestly think it's worth the punt with those managers that have those 5 free transfers to potentially utilise if you haven't already. Then this is a really good option to sort of move Bruno down to, and actually sort of keeps a bit of cash in the midfield. Should you want to sort of move him on, it's fairly easy to go up and down to whoever you want to from that position.
Indeed. We're going to take a look at Mateus Cunha now, Man United for Man United sort of replacement here. Obviously, he is in a good run of form. He scored again at the weekend. Easily could have had more than that with that big chance missed with the header just wide of the post. He's going to be talismanic, like he's similar to his Wolves days somehow, because there's obviously so many people missing for United. No Fernandes, no Mbumo, no Ahmad. Obviously, he's got Sheshko up there with him, who obviously hasn't really hit the ground running due to injuries and things like that. Newcastle at home this week is maybe not an ideal entry point, although Newcastle's away form this season has been awful. So it'll be interesting how that game goes. Obviously, it's the first game of the game week on Boxing Day as well. So, yeah, you've got a really depleted United side versus a Newcastle side who really struggle away from home at the moment. So we'll see how that one goes. But then the fixtures after that for United are really nice. It's Wolves at home, Leeds away, and then Burnley away as well after that. So you've got a very nice run of games. You brought him in last week, Ben. Auto sub off the bench. Nice bit of jam. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've got a bit lucky with Van Heck missing out due to sort of illness, but Cunha looks to be a good move in, despite sort of United losing a lot of assets to AFCON and injury. Cunha will still, and we have seen before, he will still maintain the numbers that he puts up in a team that's not as good. We saw that at Wolves last season with the numbers he put up, and lots of managers still opting for him in a team that's significantly weaker. So, with this good fixture run coming up, I think United have the quality to be able to provide some opportunities for Cunha to get some points. And with him sort of potentially taking on that talismanic role, could there be penalties on the cards as well? We'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, for me, I think he does look to be a sort of decent option, and probably along the same lines as Florian Wirtz in terms of option. He's got the fixtures, and let's see what you can do with that.
Yeah, indeed. It's going to be interesting who will take penalties for United. So I don't think it's sort of straight Cunha. I think it could be one of three: Cunha, Mount, or Sheshko. Sheshko has an 11 out of 11 record. So yeah, I wouldn't rule him out at all. I think if I had to guess, I would say Cunha, but I feel like, if he wanted to give it to someone, he absolutely would. Mason Mount is next, and this is more of a cheaper option if you were maybe looking to push the funds from Bruno Fernandes into, say, Ekatike up top and need a more budget midfielder. I don't mind Mason Mount at all. He's looked really sharp in the last few game weeks. He's got the same amount of goals as Cunha so far this season in less minutes as well. Obviously, again, going to be pretty instrumental to United over this short period where they're obviously lacking depth in numbers. So he's going to have those minutes available. I'd expect him to play every game because, quite frankly, there's no one else who can come in. So yeah, I expect him to start. What's your thoughts on him, Ben? Obviously, he's a lot cheaper than Cunha, almost over 2 million. Would you consider him for this nice run of fixtures after Newcastle?
I'd certainly consider him. It's a fairly short-term move, which is fine if you're planning on sort of moving him on quite quickly. So this is one probably for the planners and ones that sort of know where they're going to sit in 3, 4, 5 game weeks with their free transfers, because you're almost booking out a transfer for when some players come back in for Manchester United. So I'd just bear that in mind. But for the short term, I do genuinely believe he's probably one of the best value players over the next 3 game weeks, just given the availability and the fixtures that Manchester United do have coming up.
Yeah, a lot of set pieces will be given to Mason Mount as well. He was taking corners when Bruno was off the pitch and already was taking free kicks as well. So yeah, a lot of duties will be switched over to him. Declan Rice is up next. Just routes to points monster. If we were talking about like for like in terms of just how many routes to points you can get with Bruno Fernandes, I think Declan Rice is probably the next best in terms of DEFCON, set pieces, open play, assist threat, etc. I think he carries a lot of value there. The only thing with Arsenal is that their fixture run now is really tough. Home fixtures though, so you'd imagine that they should, still win those games if they're going to be winning the title. I've brought him in personally this game week. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, also brought him in this game week, so that says a lot about him. The routes to points is there, and he may be overperforming, but you're going to do that when you have the quality that Declan Rice has. Especially the XA is probably lower than we expect it to be, because a lot of those are from set pieces, which are low XA, producing opportunities. But because Arsenal's so good from those situations, they massively overperform on that metric. So for me, I think he's definitely a great value option at that price point as well. Almost feels like a bit of a bargain, especially with the spread of goals around the team in this Arsenal side. You're sort of investing, 3 million less than Bukayo Saka for potentially a similar output there.
Yeah, definitely. I think also with Rice, obviously he was rested in the midweek, came on quite late on in that Palace game. So ideal for picking him up this week. No sign of injury or anything there as well, which is great. So yeah, hopefully minutes wise he should be good going forwards. Next up, then we're going to have a slight minutes risk with Anthony Gordon. If I knew Anthony Gordon was going to play every single minute over this next run, I would be buying him immediately. I think that's the biggest concern with Gordon. A lot of people were asking about him in the questions on Instagram. It's just the minute security. Like Newcastle have a replacement for all three of those players up top. Like it's Barnes and Gordon. You've got obviously Voltemade and Visser, Murphy and Alanga. Any one of those six can play in those positions, so it's very hard to predict. And obviously, with the short turnaround in fixtures, I just think it's too much of a risk personally. If say Harvey Barnes was to get injured, I'd be very very keen on Gordon. Obviously, he's on penalty duties as well, which is huge. But outside of that, I just don't personally, for me, over this festive period, it's too much of a risk, especially with all the other options that we've been discussing. I'd much rather those guys for their minute security rather than Gordon. But if you like a risk, I think Gordon's decent, right, Ben?
Yeah, this is the risk pick, but with very much high reward. And we've seen that sort of time and time again with Gordon. Um, it's the last couple of weeks he's picked up a few goals, he's got a couple of penalties, and he's looked pretty decent. But it is that minute's risk. You've got to sort of take that on the chin. I think over this festive period, you're going to see one or two benchings. Out of the 4 or 5 game weeks, so to weigh that up with how likely you think there's going to be a potential haul. I don't mind the pick. I prefer the security of minutes in some of those other options, but if you're a bit of a risk taker, then this could be yeah.
Indeed. Then moving on to Morgan Rogers, who is our last midfielder replacement that we'll be discussing in this video. He's got Chelsea away and Arsenal away in the next two, which is far from ideal in terms of an entry point, and I think that would turn me off to not pick him up this week. However, in game week 20, I'm certainly going to be looking at him as a Semenyo replacement in my team personally. Obviously, 2 goals against United last week. I think against these two teams who are much better defensively, he's not going to have that kind of space that was allowed against United in particular and West Ham the week before. I think he'll sort of get brought back down to earth. That's not to say that he won't return against Chelsea and Arsenal. He's definitely got the capabilities of doing that, but he was afforded too much room, especially against Man United in that game week. Is there any case to go with him this week, Ben, and not just wait or go with any of the options?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a great entry point with Chelsea and Arsenal away in a congested fixture sort of schedule. So for myself, I'd wait and see. The numbers are a little unsustainable, so I reckon that evens out against some opponents who are much more defensively secure from the situations in which he's been scoring from, which is lots of open space just outside the area. They're going to be low XG shots, but the amount of space afforded and the amount of quality as he is going to, in any case, score them. So again, for the next two, I'd hold off. He's still going to be good value, even if he's 7.5, 8 million in a few weeks' time. I just think at this point, I don't see too many returns coming over those next two. And I think there's options that you can go for with much higher upside, with much better fixtures that may not be in as good a form, but actually sort of have that higher ceiling over the next two.
Definitely. Right. So let's get on to some forwards then. Obviously, Hugo Ekitike is getting absolutely steamed into this game week. It's like just the perfect sort of concoction of things to happen for him to become an A1 asset in FPL this week. He's already at 30% ownership. And to be fair to him, he's had 35 points in his last 3 game weeks. So it's not as if he's not in form and the fixtures are good and Isak's got injured. He's been returning in the weeks beforehand as well. He's up to 8.9 million now. Wolves at home and Leeds at home, as we discussed with Verts. The fixtures are really, really nice. People will have funds to move from Bruno up into the forward position as well. 8 goals this season. He's got an assist, Ben. Is there any reason not to bring in Hugo Ekitike this week?
I don't think there is actually. I think that this is probably the perfect option to be going for, especially with Bruno being injured as well. That sort of just adds on to it. I think the only reason you'd probably not go for him is if you A, didn't have the funds, and B, didn't have any injuries in your team currently. A lot are moving Thiago out from Brentford to facilitate him. I think it's a decent idea because the open play numbers from Thiago has not been brilliant, but we're got to be aware that he could score in any given game week anyway because he has got that quality. So just bear that in mind when you're deciding who to sell. But for me, Ekatike looks like one of those players that you just really sort of got to jump on because the next two could be, 2 13, 15 point hauls.
Yeah, definitely on that. I think the Thiago one's interesting. He's probably like the most sold, I'd say, up to Ekitike. And like you say, his numbers in open play the last 2 weeks against two relatively poor defences haven't been great, but they're both free back defences. And I think James from Planet FPL was mentioned this earlier in the week of how he's only returned against Man United as a free back defence, which, let's face it, everyone returns against them. So yeah, it might just be a sort of a system sort of problem where when it comes to facing those defences. So we'll see how he goes on in these future game weeks. I'm personally keeping Thiago for the next two, and then we can sort of reassess after that. But obviously, it's all team dependent on how much money you'll have going into the game week. Another forward option, if you would need one, is Jarrod Bowen, who's sort of going under the radar just because Ekitike is getting steamed into for obvious reasons. The fixtures are turning bright for West Ham. Jarrod Bowen is someone that you know will start every single game and every single minute over this festive period because he's just that guy for West Ham. Fulham at home, Brighton at home, and then Wolves away. Really nice fixtures. 5 goals, 2 assists so far this season. Are people sort of overlooking him, Ben?
Potentially, but I also think West Ham are playing so poorly right now that you can't afford to overlook him. And just
Yeah.
because even if he does grab a goal or two over this festive period, people still aren't going to be convinced on buying him for the long term because I think this West Ham team are in pretty dire straits in terms of how they're performing, the attacking potential, and if there's any goals, it's going through Jarrod Bowen. But if he's getting a goal every 2, 3, 4 games, then that's a big problem for them. So for me, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't go towards him if you've got a front three, say in FPL rather than a two up top formation. But for myself, I'd prioritise Ekitike. If you really can't make it to get up to him, then he's a good alternative. But yeah, for me, I definitely prefer the Liverpool man.
Yeah, 100% agree on that one. We've got one defensive replacement this week, just because we spoke so long on midfielders and forwards there. It's Michael Keane this week. Everton in general, their fixtures turn this game week, which is really good for anyone who owns Dewsbury Hall like me, who's not going to be playing in those fixtures. So yeah, Michael Keane, Burnley away this week, Forest away the week after, and Brentford at home the week after that. The fixtures defensively are very good. Obviously, we've had an update on Brantwaite this week of it's probably going to be looking like another month potentially, which is obviously good news for Michael Keane because he will just come straight into the team for Michael Keane at that point. The reason we're talking about Michael Keane and not Tarkowski is because Tarkowski has 4 yellow cards. So if he picks up one more yellow card, he'll be suspended for a game. That resets by the time we get to game week 20. So it's very close, but I probably just wouldn't risk it on Tarkowski just because he's pretty prone to a booking, to be honest. So yeah, Michael Keane, 4.7 million. I don't think you can find much better than that as an entry point this week. You got anything else to add on that, Ben?
Yeah, not too much. Like it's a good entry point, good fixtures. There's good clean sheet potential, although the defensive numbers from Everton generally not been too great. But that's just how they play, and they end up producing a lot of DEFCON points as well. So it's a pretty high floor and a fairly high ceiling as well for defensive assets here. So yeah, really do think that he's probably the best option to go for if you have some defensive injuries. Him and maybe Chow of Newcastle are two of the decent defensive options to look at.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to captaincy this week then, and a lot of people are sort of deciding between Haaland and Ekitike. We've got the captaincy matrix on the screen from Fantasy Football Scout. They rank Haaland as the top asset, and Ekitike is not even in the top 3. He finishes up at 4th at the moment. Obviously, that could update up until the deadline. It's just when I took the screenshot. What's your thoughts on captaincy for this week, Ben? Obviously, Haaland, again, with another double-digit haul last week. Is there just any... I know Ekitike's obviously got the fixture. He's got the minutes now. Is that enough of a reason to go against Haaland?
I don't think it is. Like Haaland is just that good. For myself, I'm looking at sticking with Haaland. I'm going to have both Haaland and Ekitike to consider. He's fine on a vice captaincy this week. Wolves at home's a really good fixture. Liverpool as a team have been unconvincing and inconsistent throughout the season in general, whereas Haaland and Manchester City have been fairly consistent. You know what you're going to get. For myself, I don't think it's a week to deviate from Haaland, although I would see merit as to why those who would look to be sort of trying to gain rank on everyone else would go for Ekitike this week.
Yeah, I'm a big Haaland go against her, I guess you could say. But for me, I'm sticking on Haaland this week. Just I feel like when it's a midfielder, there's obviously more upside with how they score them. Obviously, with goals, they get an extra point for a clean sheet. they're getting points for DEFCONs, which are more likely to be hit, for example. With Ekatike, because it's just forward on forward, and like Ben mentioned, Liverpool are more inconsistent than Manchester City. I just don't think it's worth the risk. But if you really fancy Ekatike this week, then I'm not going to turn you away from doing that. It's obviously a very, very nice fixture at home to Wolves. On to your guys' questions then. Hopefully we'll have covered a lot of the questions that you guys have sent in this whole video. Here are some more specific ones that we can sort of dive into. So Trez asks, Ben, sell Voltamade or Thiago for Ekatike? Obviously we discussed Thiago a little bit earlier on, but which one would you sell there?
I'd probably opt for Thiago over Voltemada to sell. Voltemada, I think in the short term, the fixture at Burnley away coming up, there's a couple of decent fixtures in there. I'd rather sell him. Thiago's sort of numbers in open play is not the greatest, so I think I'd prefer to sort of sell Thiago for Ekatike, but it is definitely a difficult decision, that one. So yeah, have a look at the stats, have a look at the fixtures, and weigh that up. But for me, I'd probably lean more towards selling Thiago.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. For me, I'd probably lean towards Voltemade just for the minutes side of things, like we discussed with Newcastle earlier. This is obviously playing a lot more minutes now, and I'd imagine I could just see a Vissa start against Burnley with Voltemade starting at United. So it's one of those ones where, you know, obviously you'd love Voltemade for the Burnley fixture, but is he going to get it or not? Ben's correct, though, with what he's saying about Thiago. His open play goal threat has been pretty poor, but I think I'd just chance it against Bournemouth and Spurs, who have both defensively been absolutely horrific this season. So, yeah, I'm sure that didn't help you at all, but you've got our thoughts anyway. So, on to the next one then. We've got Rogers, Semenyo, and Cunha. Rate them in an order of 1 to 3. I'll let you go first on that one, Ben.
Yeah, so number 3 for me is going to be Semenyo. Despite the return last week, the speculation around his future still carries on. So I genuinely believe that, you know, the next couple of games, maybe, you know, it could be this game, it could be next game week. I think he's going to get pulled out of that Bournemouth squad just around that speculation. So I think there's a minute's risk there. And if he does go to Manchester City, which looks to be the most likely destination, that's minute security really sort of falls away. I don't think, you know, he necessarily starts every game for them. So he's number 3. Number 2, I'd probably say Morgan Rogers. The entry point this week just puts him at number 2. As soon as we get past those next 2 game weeks, he'll be number 1. And then, yeah, Cunha at number 1 with a decent fixture run for Manchester United.
Yeah, definitely agree on all those points. Semenyo is one of those that, if you own right now, is fine to hold for maybe a week or two. But like Ben mentions, that I think the release clause has to be struck by the 10th of January. So as soon as we get into the new year, he will not be a Bournemouth player anymore, which it will be interesting how he does at Manchester City, which looks like that most likely destination at the minute. Julius asks, free hit this week or next week? I think that is very team dependent. What I do is go on something like Plan FPL, which is totally free, and just see what your team looks like next week. Whichever one you think is going to score the least points, just free hit in that week. It's a 50-50. So, yeah, you've narrowed it down to that at least. There's nothing really we can say about, you know, what assets to jump on, because obviously we don't know your team. Obviously this week, if you've got no Liverpool, then potentially a free hit this week would be great. Likewise, I'm sure there's fixtures next week, which would be a sort of similar scenario, maybe Man United players that you might want to jump on. Any more advice on that one, Ben?
Not too much, to be honest. I think, yeah, you just got to go with whatever week your team looks weakest to sort of free hit in that week over the other week. Yeah, not too much else to add on that.
Yeah, and then Nico asked at the bottom to buy Aiden Heaven this week. I just wouldn't even touch any Man United defenders at the moment. They're defensively so poor. Only 1 clean sheet kept all season against Sunderland at home. Doesn't look like it's improving, to be honest. They are conceding from low XG opportunities. And I will say they are improving in recent weeks, but it's not to an extent where I feel like they're going to keep a clean sheet anytime soon. So, yeah, I'd avoid him, despite being a good price at 3.8 million. As soon as De Ligt or Maguire is fit, then they're coming straight back in for him, and he'll be back on the bench. If you really want a punt, it'll be probably Dorgu at 4.1 million. But like I say, I'd probably avoid that United defence as much as possible. Like we say, Michael Keane, much better option. And I know he's 1 million more than Heaven, but I think that the investment's definitely going to be worth it in that scenario. So that wraps up our game week guide for game week 18. Hopefully it has helped you. Obviously, we discussed the Bruno replacements at length, so hopefully that helps you sort of decide what sort of replacement you're going for.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting game week. And yeah, as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the FPL graduates. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
We'll see you guys
Next time, have a good game week, everyone.